Captain Lee Tae-jin floated in zero gravity, watching through the observation deck's massive windows as sparks flew from the construction yard. The sight before him was something no human had ever seen before. A warship unlike anything Earth had ever built was taking shape in the darkness of space. The ship was enormous. It stretched almost 2 kilometers from nose to tail, its black hull gleaming under the work lights. Hundreds of construction robots moved around it like metal insects, welding armor plates and installing weapon systems. The UES Prometheus was humanity's greatest secret and possibly their only hope for survival. Dr. Park So-young drifted up beside him, her tablet showing endless streams of data. She was the chief scientist on the project, the woman who had made the impossible possible. Her dark hair was tied back in a simple ponytail, and her eyes showed the tiredness of someone who had worked without rest for months. The quantum fold. "Armor is almost finished," she said, pointing to the ship's outer hull. "Each plate exists in 7 dimensions at once. When something hits it, the impact gets spread across all 7 layers. It's like hitting a wall that's both there and not there at the same time." Lee nodded slowly. He still had trouble understanding all the science behind their creation. 3 years ago, he had been a simple patrol ship captain, flying missions around Earth's moon. Now he was about to command the most powerful weapon humanity had ever built. "How much longer?" he asked. 2 weeks for the main systems, another week for final testing." Park turned her tablet to show him a diagram of the ship's interior. "The AI core is the real breakthrough, though. It doesn't just follow orders like normal computers. It learns, it thinks, and most importantly, it bonds with human minds." The AI core was housed deep inside the ship, protected by layers of armor and energy shields. It was built using alien technology that humanity had reverse-engineered, but with a twist that no alien race had ever thought to try. Instead of pure logic, the AI was designed to work with human intuition and creativity. Lee remembered the first time he had connected with the AI during testing. It felt like touching the mind of something vast and ancient, yet also curious and eager to learn. The AI had no name yet, but it had asked him to call it simply friend. Commander Kim Dong-woo approached them, pushing off from a nearby wall, to join their conversation. He was the ship's first officer and tactical specialist, a man who had studied every known alien battle tactic and found weaknesses in all of them. "The weapons tests are scheduled for tomorrow," Kim said. "Admiral Kang wants to see what the causal severance cannon can really do." Park smiled grimly. "He's going to be surprised. We're not just building bigger guns. We're rewriting the rules of how weapons work." The causal severance cannon was mounted along the ship's central spine. It didn't fire energy or projectiles like normal weapons. Instead, it reached back through time and prevented its target from ever existing in the first place. The science behind it made Lee's head hurt, but the results were undeniable. In testing, they had fired it at an asteroid. The asteroid hadn't exploded or been destroyed. It had simply never been there at all. Engineer Choi Hae-rim's voice crackled over the communications system. "Captain, we're ready to test the zero-point cascade. Drive. Can you come to the engine room?" Lee pushed off from the window and floated toward the transport tube that would take him to the construction area. The ship's engine was another impossible achievement. While alien ships bent space to travel faster than light, the Prometheus would step outside of space entirely. The engine room was a maze of pipes, cables, and machinery that hummed with barely contained energy. At the center was a sphere of pure darkness, held in place by magnetic fields. It was a miniature stellar core, created by compressing matter until it achieved the density of a neutron star. Choi stood beside a control panel, her hands dancing, over holographic displays. She was young for an engineer of her skill level, but she understood the ship's systems better than anyone else. Her family had been killed in the first alien attack on a human colony ship. Since then, she had dedicated her life to making sure humans could fight back. "The power output is stable," she reported. "We're generating enough energy to power entire cities. The drive system is ready for initial testing." Lee felt a chill run down his spine. They were about to test technology that could destroy them all if something went wrong. But they had no choice. The aliens were coming, and this ship was humanity's only chance. Admiral Kang Min-ho arrived just as they were finishing the pre-test preparations. He was an older man with gray hair and scars from the early battles with alien raiders. He had seen what alien weapons could do to human ships, and he knew they needed something completely different to survive. "Are we ready?" the Admiral asked. "As ready as we can be," Lee replied. "The ship's systems are all functioning within normal parameters." "Normal?" Kang laughed bitterly. "Nothing about this ship is normal. We're building something that shouldn't exist according to every law of physics we know." That was true. The Prometheus broke so many scientific rules that most universities would have rejected its design as impossible. But humanity had learned that the universe was far stranger than their textbooks suggested. The aliens had taught them that lesson with their advanced technology and casual violence. Park pulled up a holographic display showing the ship's weapon systems. "The reality anchor array is online. The probability shield generators are functioning. The dimensional displacement engines are ready for activation." Each system was a marvel of engineering that combined human innovation with alien technology. But they had improved on the original designs in ways the aliens had never imagined. Where alien technology relied on pure mathematics and logic, human technology embraced chaos and intuition. The construction around them continued as they spoke. Robots installed the final pieces of the ship's hull, while human technicians ran cables and tested systems. Everyone working on the project knew they were building something that would change the course of human history. Lee looked out at the stars beyond the construction yard. Somewhere out there, alien fleets were preparing to crush humanity. They saw humans as primitive creatures who had stumbled into space travel by accident. They planned to either enslave the human race or wipe them out entirely. But the aliens had made one crucial mistake. They had underestimated human creativity and determination. They thought in terms of overwhelming force and technological superiority. They couldn't imagine that a primitive species might find ways to surpass their ancient wisdom. The Prometheus was proof that they were wrong. In just 3 years, humanity had gone from helpless victims to creators of weapons that could challenge the galaxy's oldest and most powerful civilizations. As Lee watched the final pieces of his ship come together, he knew that the real test was still to come. Soon, the Prometheus would face the alien fleets in battle. The outcome would determine whether humanity survived to see another century or became just another extinct species in the galaxy's long and violent history. Commander Kim Dong-woo stood in the memorial hall aboard the orbital station, looking at the names carved into the black stone wall. Each name represented a life lost during humanity's first contact with the galactic hegemony. His younger brother's name was among them, along with 3,000 other souls who had died that terrible day. The memory was still fresh in his mind, even though it had happened 3 months ago. The human exploration fleet had been celebrating their successful mission to map a distant star system when the alien ships appeared. Kim had been serving as tactical officer aboard the diplomatic vessel Harmony when everything went wrong. Ambassador Yoon Ji-woo had been so excited about the possibility of meeting another intelligent species. She had prepared for months, learning everything humanity knew about potential alien contact protocols. Her team had brought gifts representing the best of human art, music, and literature. They wanted to make a good first impression. The alien ships had emerged from what seemed like empty space. They were beautiful in a terrifying way, all curves and flowing lines that seemed to move like living things. Their hulls shimmered with colors that human eyes could barely perceive. There were 12 of them, each one larger than Earth's biggest space stations. The lead alien vessel had transmitted a message in perfect English, which should have been the first warning sign. How did they already know human language? The voice was cold and mechanical, lacking any emotion that humans would recognize. Primitive beings, you will submit to inspection and classification. Resistance will result in immediate termination. Ambassador Yoon had tried to respond with prepared diplomatic greetings. She spoke about humanity's desire for peaceful contact and mutual understanding. She offered the gifts they had brought and requested formal negotiations. The aliens had responded by scanning the human ships with energy beams that made everyone feel sick. Kim remembered the burning sensation in his head as the alien technology probed his thoughts and memories. Several crew members had collapsed from the mental intrusion. Then came the classification announcement. The mechanical voice spoke again, this time with what almost sounded like amusement. Species designation, Homo sapiens. Classification, primitive mammalian species, recently achieved basic space travel. Intelligence level, below minimum standards for civilized discourse. Recommendation, suitable for manual labor or organic disposal. Kim's hands clenched into fists as he remembered what happened next. Ambassador Yoon had tried to protest, explaining that humans were intelligent beings with their own civilization and culture. She had shown them samples of human art and poetry, trying to prove their worth. The aliens had been silent for several minutes. Then, without warning, they had opened fire. The attack was unlike anything in human military doctrine. There were no explosions or visible energy beams. The human ships simply began to fall apart at the molecular level. Kim watched in horror as the hull of his brother's science vessel started to dissolve like sugar in water. The Harmony's captain had ordered an immediate retreat, but it was too late. 10 of the 12 human ships were destroyed in the first few seconds of the attack. The remaining 2 vessels managed to escape only because the aliens seemed to lose interest once they had demonstrated their superiority. Kim's brother had been aboard one of the ships that dissolved. There hadn't even been wreckage to recover. The entire vessel and its crew of 300 people had simply ceased to exist. During the desperate flight back to Earth, the survivors had managed to intercept alien communications. The translation programs revealed the terrible truth about humanity's situation. The Galactic Hegemony was an alliance of ancient species that had controlled the galaxy for millions of years. They viewed younger races as either resources to be exploited or threats to be eliminated. The aliens were already debating what to do about humanity. Some wanted to harvest humans for slave labor. Others suggested wiping out the species entirely to prevent future problems. A few recommended keeping humans as curiosities in zoo-like preservations. Ambassador Yoon had used her diplomatic skills to buy Earth some time. She sent carefully worded messages suggesting that humanity might be useful as vassals rather than slaves. She hinted at hidden human technologies that might be valuable to the hegemony. Most importantly, she convinced them that Earth was too far from their main territories to pose any immediate threat. The aliens had given humanity 1 year to decide their fate. They could either submit to vassal status, accepting alien oversight of their civilization, or face complete annihilation. It wasn't really a choice at all. Kim left the memorial hall and walked to the command center where Admiral Kang was reviewing the latest intelligence reports. The Admiral looked older than his years, worn down by the weight of humanity's desperate situation. "Any word from the scout ships?" Kim asked. "Nothing good," Kang replied. "The aliens are building up their forces in nearby systems. Our spies count at least 50 major warships within a month's travel of Earth." The scout ships were small, stealthy vessels that humanity had built using salvaged alien technology. They could observe alien activities without being detected, but they were helpless in any real confrontation. Their reports painted a grim picture of hegemony military strength. Each alien warship was capable of destroying Earth's entire space fleet single-handedly. The technology gap was so vast that human weapons couldn't even scratch alien armor. Their shields could absorb the output of entire power plants without weakening. Their speed allowed them to cross star systems in days, while human ships needed months. But the worst part was the casual nature of alien violence. Kim had watched recordings of hegemony ships destroying other species' homeworlds. They did it without emotion or ceremony, treating the extinction of entire civilizations like routine maintenance. Dr. Park So-young entered the command center carrying a tablet full of technical data. She had been working around the clock since the first contact disaster, trying to understand how alien technology worked. Her efforts had made the Prometheus project possible. "I've been analyzing the energy signatures from the alien weapons," she reported. "They're using something called quantum phase manipulation. Basically, they can change the fundamental properties of matter at a distance." "Can we defend against it?" Admiral Kang asked. "Not with conventional shields, but I think we can do something better. Instead of trying to block their attacks, we can make our attacks ignore their defenses entirely." That was the key insight that had led to the Prometheus design. Human engineers couldn't match alien technology directly, but they could approach the same problems from completely different directions. Where aliens used mathematics and logic, humans used intuition and creativity. Kim remembered the day when Dr. Park had first explained her breakthrough. She had shown them how human consciousness could interface with alien quantum systems in ways the original designers never intended. By combining human neural patterns with alien computing power, they could create technology that transcended both species' limitations. The Prometheus was the result of that breakthrough. It was more than just a warship. It was a fusion of human creativity and alien science that created something entirely new. The ship's AI learned from human intuition while its weapons manipulated reality itself. As Kim looked out at the construction yard where the Prometheus was nearing completion, he thought about his brother and all the others who had died during first contact. They had given their lives to show humanity what they were facing. Now it was up to the survivors to make sure their sacrifice had meaning. The aliens thought humans were primitive creatures who could be easily controlled or destroyed. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The Prometheus would teach them. That underestimating human determination was a fatal mistake. The year of grace was almost over. Soon the alien fleets would come to claim their prize or destroy it. But this time, humanity would be ready to fight back. Engineer Choi Hai-rim crawled through the maintenance tunnel deep in the heart of the Prometheus, her tools floating beside her in the zero gravity. The tunnel was barely wide enough for her shoulders, but it provided direct access to the ship's most important component, the zero-point cascade drive. She emerged into the engine room and gasped at the sight before her. The drive core hung in the center of the chamber like a captured piece of the night sky. It was a perfect sphere of absolute darkness, held in place by magnetic fields that crackled with blue energy. Around it, dozens of alien components hummed, with power that made her teeth ache. The engineering team called it the heart of impossibility. According to every physics textbook ever written, the device simply couldn't exist. It violated conservation of energy, broke the laws of thermodynamics, and did things to space-time that made quantum physicists cry, but it worked. Choi had been part of the team that reverse-engineered the technology from wreckage recovered after the first contact disaster. The aliens had been so confident in their superiority that they hadn't bothered to completely vaporize the human ships they destroyed. A few pieces had survived, and those fragments contained secrets that would change everything. The alien faster-than-light drives worked by bending space around their ships. It was elegant technology that folded the universe like paper, allowing vessels to step from one point to another without actually traveling the distance between them. Human scientists had studied the principles for months before admitting they didn't have the mathematical foundation to build something similar. So they had decided to build something completely different instead. Where alien drives bent space, the human drive would break it. Instead of folding the universe, they would punch holes in reality itself and step outside of existence temporarily. It was like the difference between opening a door and blowing up the wall. Choi checked her instruments and began the pre-test sequence. The drive had been tested in small-scale experiments, but this would be the first time they attempted to move something as large as the Prometheus. If her calculations were wrong, the ship might end up scattered across several dimensions. Engine. Room to bridge, she spoke into her communicator. Drive systems are ready for initial testing. Captain Lee's voice came back immediately. Are you certain about the safety protocols? Choi looked at the sphere of contained darkness and tried to feel as confident as she sounded. As certain as we can be when we're breaking the laws of physics. The truth was that nobody really understood how the drive worked. They had built it by combining alien technology with human intuition, guided by the ship's AI and powered by pure determination. The theoretical foundation was shaky at best, but the test results spoke for themselves. During the first small-scale experiment, they had sent a probe through a tiny portal outside of normal space-time. The probe had disappeared for exactly 1 second, then reappeared 17 light-years away. When they brought it back, its atomic clock showed that no time had passed at all from the probe's perspective. The implications were staggering. The drive didn't just allow faster-than-light travel, it allowed travel without time. A ship using the Cascade drive could cross the galaxy in moments, while the rest of the universe experienced the journey as instantaneous. But the real breakthrough had come when Dr. Park So-young realized they could use the drive for more than just transportation. By creating partial portals that existed for microseconds, they could reach through space-time and affect distant objects directly. It was the foundation for weapons that could strike anywhere in the galaxy without warning. Choi's team had spent weeks building the full-scale drive system. The central core required a miniature stellar fusion reactor to provide enough power. The containment fields needed exotic matter that existed only in the hearts of neutron stars. The control systems used alien quantum processors linked to human neural interfaces. Every component pushed the boundaries of what was possible. The stellar core compressed matter to densities that should have created a black hole. The exotic matter existed in 7 dimensions simultaneously. The neural interfaces allowed human consciousness to directly manipulate quantum states. Beginning. Power-up sequence, Choi announced. The stellar core began to spin faster, its magnetic field strengthening until the air itself became charged with energy. The exotic matter components started to vibrate in frequencies that human ears couldn't hear, but that made everyone feel nervous without knowing why. The ship's AI, which they had started calling Friend, spoke through the communication system. Its voice was calm and slightly curious, like a child asking questions about the world. "I can feel the drive responding," Friend said. "The space around us is becoming flexible. It's like reality is holding its breath." Choi watched her instruments. As power levels climbed toward the activation threshold, the engineering team had calculated that they needed approximately 17 times the energy output of a typical fusion reactor to create a stable portal. The stellar core was currently producing 23 times that amount. "Drive core at 80% power," she reported. "Quantum field generators online. Exotic matter resonance is stable." On the bridge, Captain Lee was watching displays that showed the space around the ship. Sensors were detecting gravitational anomalies and temporal distortions that grew stronger as the drive powered up. Reality itself was beginning to bend under the strain. "Sir," Commander Kim said, "we're detecting some unusual readings. It looks like the drive is affecting time as well as space." That was expected, though still frightening. The Cascade drive worked by stepping outside of the normal flow of space-time. During the transition, the ship would exist in a realm where the usual rules didn't apply. Past, present, and future would become meaningless concepts. "Drive core at 90%, Choi announced. "Initiating quantum cascade in 10 seconds. She took a deep breath and placed her hand on the activation control. Around her, the engineering team held their breath. They were about to do something that no intelligent species in the galaxy had ever attempted. They were going to step outside of existence itself. 5 seconds, 4, 3, 2, 1, Cascade drive activated. The sphere of darkness suddenly expanded, swallowing the entire engine room in absolute black. Choi felt a moment of terror as reality disappeared around her. Then, just as suddenly, normal space returned. But something was wrong. "Captain," she said into her communicator, "we have a problem. According to my instruments, we just traveled backward in time by 17 seconds. There was silence on the bridge for a long moment. Then Captain Lee's voice came back, carefully controlled. "Can you repeat that, Engineer Choi?" The drive worked perfectly. "We stepped outside of space-time and back again. But during the transition, we somehow moved 17 seconds into the past. The atomic clocks confirm it." Dr. Park's excited voice came over the communication system. "This is incredible. We've achieved something the aliens consider impossible. Time travel is supposed to be a myth, even for the most advanced species." Choi looked at her instruments again, making sure she hadn't made an error. But the readings were clear. The Prometheus had briefly existed outside of time, and when it returned to normal space, it had emerged slightly earlier than when it left. "What does this mean for combat applications?" Commander Kim asked. The implications were staggering. A ship that could move backward in time, even by seconds, would be nearly impossible to fight. It could dodge attacks that had already been fired, strike enemies before they knew they were under attack, and exist in multiple moments simultaneously. "It means," Dr. Park said slowly, "that we've built something even more powerful than we intended. The Prometheus isn't just faster than light, it's faster than time itself." Choi began shutting down the drive system, carefully bringing the stellar core back to stable operation. The test had been a complete success, but it had also revealed capabilities they hadn't expected. The ship they were building was becoming something unprecedented in galactic history. As the exotic matter settled back into its containment fields, Choi couldn't help but smile. The aliens thought they were dealing with primitive humans who had barely learned to travel between stars. They had no idea that humanity had just achieved mastery over time itself. The Prometheus was almost ready for its first real mission. Soon, the galaxy would learn what humans could accomplish when they refused to accept the word impossible. Dr. Park So-young stood in the weapons testing chamber, watching as technicians made final adjustments to humanity's most terrifying creation. The causal severance cannon stretched along the entire length of the room, its crystalline core pulsing, with energy that seemed to bend light around it. Admiral Kang Min-ho floated beside her, his face grim as he studied the weapon's specifications. They were about to test something that could change the nature of warfare forever. The cannon didn't just destroy targets, it removed them from existence entirely. "Explain it to me one more time," the Admiral said. In simple terms, Park pulled up a holographic display showing the weapon's operating principles. The mathematics involved were so complex that even she didn't fully understand all the implications. "Normal weapons destroy things by adding energy," she began. "Explosives release chemical energy, lasers deliver thermal energy, projectiles transfer kinetic energy, but the causal severance cannon works differently. It reaches back through time and prevents the target from ever existing." The Admiral shook his head slowly. "That sounds like science fiction." "So did faster-than-light travel until the aliens showed us it was possible. The universe is much stranger than we thought." Park gestured to the cannon's core components. "We're using the same principles that power our cascade drive, but in reverse. Instead of stepping outside of time, we're reaching through it." The weapon had been inspired by a discovery made during the drive testing. When the Prometheus briefly traveled backward in time, the engineering team noticed that it had created small temporal distortions in nearby space. Objects caught in those distortions experienced time differently, aging faster or slower than normal. Park had realized that with enough power and precision, they could extend those distortions to encompass distant targets. By accelerating a target's timeline to infinite speed, they could make it experience all of its future simultaneously. The result was that the target would reach the end of its existence instantly. But the real breakthrough had come when they discovered they could reverse the process. Instead of accelerating time, they could run it backward until the target reached a point before it had ever been created. The target wouldn't just die, it would never have lived at all. "The test target is ready," announced Lieutenant Yu from the observation deck. She was pointing to a display screen that showed an asteroid floating in empty space, about 1,000 kilometers from their position. The asteroid was roughly spherical, about 50 meters in diameter, made of ordinary iron and rock. It had been specially selected because its composition and history were well documented. If the weapon worked as designed, all records of the asteroid would become contradictory, as if the universe couldn't decide whether it had ever existed. "Begin charging sequence," Admiral Kang ordered. The cannon's crystalline core began to glow brighter as exotic energy flowed through its quantum matrices. The weapon drew power directly from the ship's stellar reactor, requiring more energy than some planets used in a year. The air in the chamber became charged with temporal distortions that made everyone feel slightly dizzy. Captain Lee Tae-jin joined them on the observation deck, having come to witness the test personally. As the ship's commanding officer, he needed to understand every weapon at his disposal. His face was thoughtful as he watched the charging process. "What happens if we fire this at a planet?" he asked quietly. Park felt a chill run down her spine. She had run the calculations, but the results were so terrifying that she hoped they would never need to use the weapon at full power. Theoretically, we could erase an entire world from history. Not just destroy it, but make it so that it never existed in the first place. Every person who ever lived there, every event that happened there, all of it would simply vanish from the timeline. The implications were staggering. The weapon could eliminate not just targets, but the entire causal chain that had led to their existence. Used against a key historical figure, it might unravel the history of entire civilizations. "Cannon charge at 50%, reported the weapons officer. "Temporal field generators are stable. Quantum targeting array is locked onto the test asteroid." The ship's AI friend spoke through the communication system. Its voice carried a note of concern that was unusual for an artificial intelligence. "I can see the target through the temporal distortions," friend said. "But something strange is happening. The asteroid's timeline is becoming blurry. I can see multiple versions of it existing simultaneously." That was another unexpected effect they had discovered during smaller tests. The cannon's targeting systems could see through time, observing all possible versions of a target across multiple timelines. It was like looking at a photograph that showed every moment of an object's existence at once. "Charge at 75%, the weapons officer announced. "All systems nominal." Admiral Kang studied the energy readings on his tablet. The power requirements were enormous, but the ship's hybrid human-alien reactor was handling the load without strain. The stellar core that Engineer Choi had installed was proving capable of supporting weapons that would have been impossible with conventional power sources. "Sir," Commander Kim reported from the bridge, "we're detecting some unusual gravitational effects around the target. Space-time is becoming unstable in a sphere approximately 100 kilometers in radius. That was expected, but still concerning. The weapon affected more than just its direct target. The temporal distortions it created could interfere with nearby objects, potentially damaging anything within the blast radius. They would need to be very careful about where and when they used it." "Cannon charge at 90%, the weapons officer said. "Ready to fire on your command." Park watched the energy readings climb toward maximum. The crystalline core was now glowing so brightly that it hurt to look at directly. The temporal field generators were creating distortions that made the air shimmer like heat waves. "All stations report ready," Captain Lee announced. "Dr. Park, are you satisfied with the weapon parameters?" Park checked her instruments one final time. Everything looked correct, but they were venturing into uncharted territory. No species in galactic history had ever built a weapon that manipulated causality itself. "As ready as we can be," she replied. "We're about to do something that the universe might not appreciate." "Fire!" Admiral Kang ordered. The cannon discharged with a sound like reality tearing. A beam of distorted space-time lanced out toward the asteroid, moving faster than light itself. The test chamber's instruments screamed warnings as temporal distortions washed over them. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. The asteroid continued floating in space exactly as before. Then suddenly, it simply wasn't there anymore. "Target eliminated," the weapons officer reported. "No debris detected, no energy signature. The asteroid is gone." But Park was studying readouts that showed something far more disturbing. According to the ship's sensors, there had never been an asteroid there at all. The gravitational sensors showed no sign that anything had ever occupied that position. Even their own targeting computers were confused, unable to understand what they had been aiming at. "This is impossible," Lieutenant Yu said, staring at her instruments. The navigation records show that we fired at empty space, but I clearly remember there being an asteroid there. That was the most unsettling aspect of the weapon. It didn't just destroy things, it made them never have existed. The only reason the crew remembered the asteroid was because they had been outside the weapon's causal effect when it fired. Friend's voice came through the speakers, sounding puzzled. I have conflicting data streams. Some of my memory banks say we targeted an asteroid. Others say we fired at empty space. The timeline is contradicting itself. Dr. Park realized they had created something even more powerful than intended. The said causal severance cannon didn't just erase targets from the present. It erased them from history itself. Any enemy ship hit by the weapon would simply cease to have ever existed. Admiral Kang was quiet for a long moment, absorbing the implications of what they had just witnessed. Finally, he turned to Park with a grim expression. Doctor, I want this weapon system locked down under maximum security protocols. The authorization codes for this system will be known only to Captain Lee and myself. Park nodded in agreement. They had built something that was perhaps too dangerous for anyone to possess. The power to erase things from history was a responsibility that no single person should carry. As the testing chamber powered down and the temporal distortions faded, Park couldn't help but wonder what they had unleashed. The Prometheus was becoming more than just a warship. It was becoming a weapon that could rewrite reality itself. The aliens who thought humans were primitive creatures suitable only for slavery were about to learn how wrong they were. But Park wondered if humanity was ready for the power they had created. Some weapons were too terrible to use even against one's worst enemies. Captain Lee Tae-jin stood on the bridge of the Prometheus, watching as 200 alien warships moved into attack formation. Each enemy vessel was larger than anything humanity had ever built before this moment. Their weapons could destroy continents, and their shields could absorb the energy output of entire stars. But Lee felt no fear as he studied the tactical display. The ship around him hummed with power that existed beyond conventional understanding. The Prometheus was more than just a warship. It was humanity's declaration that the impossible was merely a suggestion. "Range to target fleet?" he asked. Commander Kim Dong-woo checked his instruments. 50,000 kilometers and closing. The alien ships are holding formation, waiting for us to get closer. They want to make a show of destroying us, Dr. Park, So Young observed from her science station. They think one ship can't threaten an entire fleet. Lee nodded grimly. Let them think that. How are our systems? Engineer Choi Hya-rim's voice came from the engine room. Cascade drive is fully operational. Stellar core is running at optimal parameters. We have enough power to run every system simultaneously for approximately 6 hours. 6 hours would be more than enough. Based on their analysis of alien tactics, most space battles in the galaxy lasted only minutes. The side with superior technology would eliminate the enemy quickly and efficiently, with minimal damage to themselves. The aliens had no experience fighting an enemy that could manipulate time itself. AI status? Lee asked. Friend's voice filled. The bridge, calm and curious as always. All systems are responsive. I can see the enemy fleet clearly through our sensors. They're beautiful ships, built by species with millions of years of experience, but they're designed for conventional warfare. The ship's artificial intelligence had been studying alien technology for months, learning everything it could about hegemony, military doctrine. Friend could process information faster than any biological mind, but it also possessed something the aliens had never encountered: human intuition and creativity. Can you identify their weapon systems? Quantum disruptors, gravitational field generators, and plasma cannons. All very advanced by galactic standards. Their shields use multidimensional energy matrices that can absorb tremendous amounts of damage. Lee smiled grimly. But can they absorb damage that comes from outside of time? Unknown. We're about to find out. The enemy fleet was now close, enough that Lee could see individual ships through the main viewport. They were indeed beautiful, with flowing lines and elegant curves that spoke of aesthetic sensibilities refined over eons. But beauty wouldn't save them from what was coming. "Sir," Kim reported, "the aliens are powering up their weapons. All enemy ships show combat-ready status." "Let them fire first," Lee ordered. "I want them to understand exactly how outmatched they are." General Vextar's voice came over the communication system, translated by the ship's computers. "Human vessel, you will power down your systems and prepare to be boarded. This is your final warning." Lee activated the transmission system. "General, I gave you a chance to leave peacefully. You chose war instead. The responsibility for what happens next is yours alone. You dare threaten the hegemony with a single primitive ship?" "I'm not threatening you with a ship," Lee replied, calmly. "I'm threatening you with an idea. The idea that humans refuse to kneel." He cut the transmission and turned to his crew. "All stations prepare for combat. Weapons free. Show them what humans can accomplish when we put our minds to it." Sus. Alien fleet opened fire simultaneously. Hundreds of energy beams lanced across space, each one carrying enough power to vaporize a mountain. The combined bombardment lit up the darkness between stars like a miniature sun. The beams struck the Prometheus and simply stopped existing. Echew. Ship's probability shields didn't block the incoming fire. They convinced the universe that the attacks had never been fired in the first place. Each energy beam encountered a field of altered causality and found itself erased from the timeline before it could reach its target. "No damage to primary systems," Choi reported from engineering. "The shields are holding perfectly." Lee watched the alien fleet's formation waver as their sensors tried to understand what had just happened. Their weapons had fired. Their energy. Readings showed successful hits, but their target remained completely undamaged. "Return fire," Lee ordered. "Target the flagship first. Causal severance cannon, minimum power setting." Dr. Park's hands moved over her controls with practiced precision. "Cannon charged and ready. Targeting the vessel at coordinates Mark 7. Fire." The Prometheus unleashed its primary weapon for the first time in actual combat. A beam of distorted. Space-time reached across the battlefield faster than light itself, touching General Vextar's flagship for just an instant. The massive alien warship simply ceased to exist. There was no explosion, no debris, no energy signature. One moment the flagship was there, commanding the fleet and coordinating the attack. The next moment, it had never existed at all. The surrounding ships found themselves confused about who was supposed to be in command. "Target eliminated," Park reported. "The flagship has been removed from the timeline." Friend's voice carried a note of satisfaction. "The enemy fleet is experiencing command confusion. Without their flagship, they're having trouble coordinating their attacks." Lee studied the tactical display as the alien formation began to break apart. Ships that had been perfectly coordinated moments before were now firing independently, unable to understand why their command structure had suddenly vanished. "Secondary targets," he ordered. "Gravity well projectors. Fire at will." The Prometheus deployed its secondary weapon systems. Artificial gravity generators created tiny black holes that appeared throughout the enemy formation. The miniature singularities lasted only seconds before evaporating, but that was long enough to tear apart any ship caught in their influence. 5 alien vessels were pulled apart by gravitational forces that exceeded anything they had been designed to resist. Their hulls stretched like rubber before snapping back and fragmenting into millions of pieces. "Enemy fleet is attempting to retreat," Kim reported. 17 ships destroyed, others are trying to reach minimum safe distance for faster than light. "Travel!" "Don't let them escape," Lee ordered. "If even one ship returns to report what happened here, every species in the galaxy will know what we're capable of." The Prometheus engaged its cascade drive, stepping partially outside of normal space-time. To the alien ships, the human vessel appeared to exist in multiple locations simultaneously, making it impossible to target effectively. Lee watched as his ship danced between dimensions, striking the fleeing aliens from angles that shouldn't have been possible. The molecular disintegration beams reached through space-time to touch distant targets, breaking atomic bonds and reducing entire warships to their component elements. 30 ships destroyed, Kim reported. 50 ships destroyed, 70 ships destroyed. The battle was becoming a massacre. The alien weapons couldn't touch a ship that existed in 7 dimensions simultaneously, while the Prometheus could strike from outside normal space. It was like watching ancient sailing ships try to fight a nuclear submarine. "Sir," Friend announced, "I'm detecting quantum signatures from the remaining alien ships. They're attempting to self-destruct rather than be captured or destroyed." Lee felt a moment of respect for the enemy crews. They were facing something beyond their understanding, but they were still trying to deny their technology to the enemy. It was a brave gesture that deserved recognition. "Let them," he decided. "They fought well against impossible odds." The remaining 60 alien ships triggered their self-destruct systems simultaneously. The explosions lit up space for thousands of kilometers, creating a brief new star where the hegemony fleet had been. When the light faded, only the Prometheus remained. "Battle complete," Kim reported. "All enemy vessels destroyed. No damage to our systems." Lee looked out at the debris field that was all that remained of the most powerful military force the galaxy had assembled in a millennium. 200 ships, each one representing the pinnacle of alien military technology, had been eliminated by a single human vessel in less than 40 minutes. "Send a message to Earth," he ordered. "Tell them the aliens won't be bothering us anymore." But even as he spoke, Lee knew this was only the beginning. The destruction of the hegemony fleet would send shockwaves across the galaxy. Every civilized species would want to know how a primitive human ship had accomplished the impossible. The Prometheus had proven that humanity could fight and win against overwhelming odds. But the victory would bring new challenges that might be even more dangerous than the original threat. Chancellor Mordain floated in the ceremonial chamber of the Galactic Council, his ancient form surrounded by the holographic representatives of 1,000 civilizations. The emergency session had been called within hours of receiving reports about the destruction of the hegemony fleet, and representatives were still arriving from across the galaxy. The Chancellor's species, the Eternal Ones, had ruled the galaxy for over 10 million years. They had seen the rise and fall of countless civilizations, witnessed the birth and death of stars, and maintained order across billions of worlds. But they had never faced anything like the reports coming from the human system. "The data has been verified?" Mordain asked, his voice carrying the weight of eons. Researcher Nalthek of the Archive Guild manipulated holographic displays with tentacles that moved like liquid metal. multiple independent sources confirm the same impossible story. A single human vessel destroyed the entire hegemony expeditionary fleet. 200 ships eliminated in 37 minutes. The chamber filled with the sounds of shock and disbelief from species that had never known fear. The Archive Guild was the galaxy's most trusted source of information, maintaining records that spanned geological ages. If they confirmed the reports, then the impossible had truly occurred. Tactical analysis? The Chancellor requested. War Leader Kesavar of the Dominion forces stepped forward, her crystalline body reflecting the chamber's lights. The weapon signatures are unlike anything in our databases. The humans appear to have developed technology that manipulates causality itself. They can attack targets through time, exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, and generate gravitational anomalies that ignore conventional physics. Representatives from across the galaxy processed this information with growing alarm. The Galactic Council had maintained peace for millions of years by ensuring that no single species possessed overwhelming military advantage. The balance of power was carefully maintained through technology-sharing agreements and mutual defense treaties, but the humans had apparently broken that balance entirely. What do we know about their technological development? Mordain asked. Dr. Velanor of the Science Consortium consulted her data tablets. 3 months ago, human technology was barely capable of interstellar travel. They used primitive fusion reactors and crude faster-than-light drives. According to our projections, they shouldn't have achieved true spacefaring civilization for another 1,000 years. Yet somehow they have surpassed civilizations that have had millions of years to develop, observed Ambassador Jextar of the Trade Federation. This suggests either outside intervention or a fundamental misunderstanding of human capabilities. The truth was that the Galactic Council had made the same mistake as the hegemony. They had judged human potential based on their current technology rather than their rate of innovation. No species in galactic history had ever advanced so quickly from primitive spaceflight to weapons that could manipulate time itself. Could they have received assistance from unknown sources? Suggested Elder Morval of the Archive Worlds. Negative, Dr. Velanor replied. Our analysis of the wreckage from the original contact incident shows that the humans reverse-engineered hegemony technology. But they didn't simply copy it, they improved upon it in ways the original designers never imagined. That was the most disturbing aspect of the situation. The humans hadn't just acquired advanced technology, they had innovated beyond what the galaxy's most advanced civilizations thought possible. Their approach to engineering combined logic with intuition in ways that produced impossible results. What are the strategic implications? Chancellor Mordain asked. War Leader Kesavar activated a galactic map showing military force distributions across known space. If the humans can build more ships like the Prometheus, they could potentially challenge the combined forces of the entire Council. A single vessel that can exist outside of normal space-time cannot be fought using conventional tactics. The implications were staggering. For millions of years, galactic politics had been based on the assumption that sufficient numbers and technological maturity could overcome any single threat. But the humans had apparently developed weapons that made numbers irrelevant. What do we know about their intentions? Asked Trade Administrator Kexalon of the Commerce Guild. Ambassador Yoon Ji-woo's image appeared on the main display as the Council's translation systems processed her latest diplomatic messages. The human female looked tired but determined as she spoke from her embassy ship orbiting a neutral world. The human position is simple, Yoon's translated voice explained. They want recognition as a sovereign species with the right to independent development. They're not seeking to conquer or dominate other civilizations, but they will defend themselves against any attempts at subjugation. And if we refuse their demands? Chancellor Mordain asked. They've made it clear that they consider isolation preferable to submission. If the galaxy cannot accept them as equals, they will simply withdraw from galactic civilization entirely. That option presented its own dangers. A species with the humans' technological capabilities could not be safely ignored. If they chose isolation, they might continue developing even more advanced weapons in secret. The next time they emerged, they might be completely beyond any force the galaxy could assemble. There is another consideration, Dr. Vel Anor added quietly. Our analysis of the battle data suggests that the human ship was operating at only a fraction of its potential capabilities. They could have eliminated the hegemony fleet much more quickly if they had chosen to do so. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The humans had demonstrated restraint even while defending themselves. They could have annihilated their enemies instantly, but instead, they had allowed the alien crews to surrender or self-destruct with honor. This suggests that despite their power, they are not inherently aggressive, observed philosopher Rental of the Wisdom Circles. They responded to threats proportionally and showed mercy when possible. Chancellor Mordain considered the options available to the Council. They could attempt to form a coalition to destroy humanity before they became an even greater threat. But such an attack would require the combined forces of dozens of major civilizations, and there was no guarantee of success against weapons that operated outside normal physics. Alternatively, they could attempt to negotiate with the humans and find a way to integrate them into galactic civilization. But accepting a species with such overwhelming technological advantages would fundamentally alter the balance of power that had maintained peace for eons. Ancient protocols call for the elimination of any species that develops prohibited technologies, war leader Kesevar pointed out. Temporal manipulation weapons have been banned for over 1 million years due to their potential for universal destruction. But the protocols were written before anyone actually possessed such technology, Chancellor Mordain replied. How do we eliminate a species that can step outside of time itself? The question hung in the chamber like a death sentence. The galaxy's most powerful civilizations were facing the possibility that they had encountered something beyond their ability to control or destroy. I propose a different approach. Ambassador Yoon's voice came through the translation system. The human diplomat had been monitoring the council session and requested permission to speak. The human position, she continued, is that some weapons are too dangerous for anyone to possess. We propose a mutual disarmament agreement. Humanity will voluntarily restrict the construction of temporal manipulation weapons if the galaxy agrees to recognize our sovereignty and includes us in future disarmament treaties. It was an unprecedented offer. No species in galactic history had ever voluntarily given up a decisive military advantage. The humans were proposing to limit their own power in exchange for acceptance as equals. Chancellor Mordain realized that the galaxy stood at a crossroads. They could choose war against an enemy that might be impossible to defeat, or they could choose to trust a species that had already demonstrated restraint and wisdom beyond their years. The decision would reshape the future of galactic civilization. Captain Lee Tae-jin stood in the observation lounge of the Prometheus, watching as representatives from 1,000 worlds gathered in the neutral space around the ancient council station. 3 months had passed since the battle that destroyed. The hegemony fleet and the galaxy was still struggling to understand what had happened. The station itself was a marvel of engineering that predated most civilizations. It floated in the space between galaxies, its crystalline structures reflecting the light of distant stars. For millions of years, it had served as neutral ground where species could meet without fear of conflict. Today, it would host the most important negotiations in galactic history. Ambassador Yunji Wu joined him at the observation window, her face showing the exhaustion of months spent in diplomatic discussions. She had been humanity's voice in the galaxies, corridors of power, defending their right to exist as an independent species. "How are the negotiations progressing?" Lee asked. "Better than expected," Yun replied. "The destruction of the hegemony fleet convinced most species that humanity cannot be conquered by force, but there's still significant opposition to accepting us as equals." Lee nodded grimly. He had expected this. The galaxy's established powers had spent millions of years maintaining their dominance over younger species. Accepting humanity as an equal partner would set a precedent that could encourage other suppressed civilizations to demand independence. What about the weapons restrictions? That's where things get complicated. The Council wants us to completely dismantle the Prometheus and share all our technology. In exchange, they're offering limited recognition as a protected species. Protected by whom? Lee asked, with bitter humor. The same civilizations that stood by while the hegemony planned to exterminate us? Through the window, they could see the massive forms of Council warships, maintaining a respectful distance from the station. Each vessel represented the military, might of an ancient civilization, but Lee knew that all of them combined could not stand against the technology humanity had developed. Dr. Park So-young approached from across the lounge, carrying a tablet filled with technical specifications. She had been working with the Council's science teams, sharing carefully selected portions of human research while keeping the most sensitive discoveries secret. The Council scientists are fascinated by our dimensional manipulation technology, she reported. They're offering to trade the advanced medical technology and stellar engineering techniques in exchange for our cascade drive specifications. What do you think? Lee asked. I think they're terrified, Park replied honestly. They've built their entire civilization around the assumption that technological progress follows predictable patterns. Our innovations challenge everything they think they know about physics. The ship's AI friend spoke through the lounge's communications system. Captain, we're receiving a priority transmission from Chancellor Mordain. He requests a private meeting with you. Lee exchanged glances with his companions. The Chancellor rarely spoke directly with representatives of individual species. This suggested that the negotiations had reached a critical point. Put him through. The lounge's main display activated, showing the ancient form of the galaxy's supreme leader. Chancellor Mordain looked exactly as he had when the Council was first formed millions of years ago, his crystalline body unchanged by the passage of time. Captain Lee, the Chancellor began, I want to speak plainly about the situation we face. I appreciate directness, Lee replied. Your species has achieved something that should be impossible. In 3 years, you have advanced from primitive space travel to weapons that can manipulate causality itself. This level of progress threatens the stability that has maintained galactic peace for eons. Lee felt a flash of anger. We didn't ask for this situation. We were minding our own business when your hegemony allies decided to exterminate us. Indeed. And your response has convinced many council members that humanity must be eliminated before you become an even greater threat. The blunt statement hung in the air between them. Lee had suspected that some factions wanted to destroy humanity, but hearing it confirmed was still sobering. What's your position, Chancellor? I believe that would be a mistake. Your species has shown remarkable restraint in the use of your weapons. You could have annihilated the hegemony fleet instantly, but instead you gave them opportunities to surrender. This suggests wisdom that many older species lack. Lee sensed that the Chancellor was leading up to something important. What are you proposing? A compromise that will satisfy both human independence and galactic security concerns. Humanity will be granted full recognition as a sovereign species, with all the rights and protections that status provides. In exchange, you will agree to voluntary restrictions on the construction of temporal manipulation weapons. Dr. Park leaned forward, with interest. What kind of restrictions? Complete prohibition on any weapon system capable of altering causality. The Prometheus itself must be decommissioned, its weapons removed, and its technology classified under the highest security protocols. Lee felt his heart sink. The Prometheus was more than just a ship. It was humanity's guarantee of independence. Without it, they would be vulnerable to any future threats that emerged. And if we refuse, then the galaxy will unite against you. Every civilization, every species, every world will combine their forces to eliminate what they see as an existential threat to the universe itself. The ultimatum was delivered without emotion, but Lee could hear the certainty behind it. The galaxy's fear of human technology was strong enough to overcome millions of years of political divisions. Ambassador Yoon spoke for the first time. What guarantees do we have that the galaxy will honor this agreement? What's to stop another hegemony from emerging in a few thousand years? The Treaty of Mutual Defense, Chancellor Mordain replied. Humanity will be included in all future security agreements. Any attack on human territory will be considered an attack on the entire Council. It was a remarkable offer. No species had ever been granted such protections without first proving themselves over millennia of cooperation. Lee looked at his companions, seeing the same uncertainty in their faces that he felt. They had worked so hard to build the Prometheus, sacrificing everything to create humanity's ultimate defense. But perhaps true victory lay not in keeping ultimate weapons, but in proving they were wise enough to give them up. The knowledge remains, Dr. Park said quietly. We can't unlearn what we've discovered. If humanity is ever threatened again, we could rebuild the technology. That's precisely what concerns the Council, the Chancellor admitted, but your willingness to voluntarily restrict yourselves will demonstrate the wisdom necessary for true galactic citizenship. Lee made his decision. We accept the proposal with one condition. The Prometheus will make one final journey before decommissioning. We want to take it beyond the galactic rim, where its technology can never be recovered or reverse-engineered. Agreed, Chancellor Mordain said immediately. The Council will witness the vessel's final departure. 3 weeks later, Captain Lee stood on the bridge of the Prometheus for the last time. The ship's systems hummed with barely contained power as they prepared for their final jump. Around them, representatives from hundreds of civilizations watched through long-range sensors. All systems ready for cascade drive activation, Engineer Choi reported from the engine room. Final destination confirmed, Commander Kim added. We'll emerge in intergalactic space, approximately 1 million light-years beyond the galactic rim. Lee looked around the bridge one last time, memorizing every detail. This ship had been humanity's greatest achievement and their salvation. Now it would become their gift to the universe, a demonstration that some powers were too great for anyone to possess. "Friend, are you ready?" he asked. The AI's voice was calm and accepting. I understand the necessity, Captain. Some weapons are too dangerous to exist, even in the hands of those wise enough to create them. Activate the Cascade Drive, Lee ordered. The Prometheus stepped outside of reality one final time, carrying its impossible weapons beyond the reach of any civilization. When it emerged in the void between galaxies, Lee triggered the ship's self-destruct systems, ensuring that its secrets would die with it. But the knowledge remained in human minds and computers. And throughout the galaxy, younger species looked up at the stars and whispered stories about the humans who had built a weapon so powerful that they chose to destroy it rather than use it. Humanity had taken its place among the stars not as conquerors, but as the species that proved that ultimate power required ultimate responsibility.